Welcome to Collection Bites. I'm going to be giving a little presentation about the impact that museums have had on Gothic literature and specifically Gothic novels. When you think of Gothic novels, tend to go for Victorian period, so 1837 to 1901. I'm going to be focusing on Dracula, written by Bram Stoker. And there's a lot of inspiration for Dracula. Especially when you think of Dracula, you think of vampires and vampire bats. And here we have something that looks like a vampire bat. However, it is a fruit bat that has been specifically stuffed to look scary. So the fangs are out. This wouldn't be how it would normally look. Especially when people think of vampire bats, they think all bats would bite people. However, vampire bats, we don't get them in the UK. You normally get them in Central America, sort of South America. And they don't tend to bite humans. If we get a bat coming towards us in our face, we'll start flinging our arms around, we'll run off, and they tend to go for things more like cows or animals that can't really run away. You have stories going back to sort of like 9th century of sort of spirits drinking blood, and especially in Bulgaria, you've got stories of people who, if they lived a life that was immoral, they would turn into this creature that would have no bones, would walk through walls, and would drink animal blood. So this was never specified as being humans. It's only when you get stories of local sort of accidents happening where people maybe were buried a little bit too early, and they would rise from the dead, appear pale, maybe because they had sort of illness or disease, and would go on a rampage. And there's a specific story in Bulgaria where a man broke into his family home, attacked his wife and son and bit them. There was no mention of drinking blood, just this sort of singular attack. However, this story spread, and as the story spread, small little details changed, and instead of being a singular event where a man who maybe was a bit ill and rose from the dead, it turned into a monster with big fangs that drank blood, and all these things were added, and the story travelled from Bulgaria to Germany and ended up going to the UK, where people like Bram Stoker and other famous novelists could have heard this story, as well as getting inspired by figures like Vlad the Impaler, and ended up with stories like Dracula. So during the Victorian period, one important thing that happened was the Industrial Revolution, and trains were being changed. You could now go from Scotland to London, you could go from London to Paris, you could even get all the way to Berlin if you wanted to. People were able to go to museums that they hadn't been to, go to places they hadn't been to, and talk to people, get stories off people. People were going out and seeing the world a bit more, and there was a genuine interest in these stories and the Gothic and the macabre. So another novel that isn't always considered a Gothic novel but has a lot of aspects of the Gothic is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So we know for a fact that he was inspired for The Picture of Dorian Gray after visiting the National Portrait Gallery and seeing a recent discovery of portraits called the Fine Portraits. These were uncovered by William Flinders Petrie. He was a very famous archaeologist in the Victorian period, and he would send groups on digs in Egypt, and specifically Hawara, where these portraits were uncovered. When he originally found the portraits, Petrie was really annoyed because he saw them and he thought, oh, these are Renaissance portraits, these aren't Egyptian, because the quality and how detailed these portraits are incredible. And even some of the portraits had almost what looked like pencil sketchings on the back. And this double-sided sort of portrait is what inspired Oscar Wilde, or we believe inspired Picture of Dorian Gray. We know Oscar Wilde went to the National Portrait Gallery as his father, Sir William Wilde, was friends and a patron of Sir William Flinders Petrie. And he would have been told about these portraits and would have been inspired to go and told his son, oh, you should check this out. And he did, and we probably, if that wouldn't have happened, we probably wouldn't have had The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is an incredible book.